it. And in a minute I'll tell you how we're going to run the process. In this document, I'll just bring your attention to the fact that there are tutor notes. Those are the notes for you to tell you what to do. You might want to focus on those, just looking at your document at the moment. Love Vietnamese food. This afternoon you are going to be learner tutors, okay? And we will have the group of tutors who are to be food, correct me if I'm wrong, but the group of tutors who are going to be the tutor trainers for the school in the future will be the main people on the inner row. Is that right? Yeah? And then others will have a more observing role. So I think that's the way it works. Anyway, some of you will be sitting in a row as taking turns at being tutors, and others of you will have a more observer role. That's the way I understand it. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. So the way that we work this is that we have a group of students, and Jill is with them in the PBL rooms now, telling them how to be PBL students. They're a mix of people. There's some more junior year people and some more senior people. I think there's one that's even a graduate, okay? That means that the amount of prior knowledge in the group is variable, but across the group there's a good fund of prior knowledge, okay? So plenty to draw on. It does also mean that we will have some students who feel more junior and some students who feel more senior, and so there may be a hierarchy in the students. So one of our challenges is helping them all to engage and not always look to the senior student, okay? So it's already got some challenges built in for us. I believe all the students speak English quite well. They all have an IELTS of 7 or more, which is the requirement for entry into my medical school. So they should be like, for Jill and I, like most of the international students we have in our school. The way we're going to do this is that each tutor, different people will get a turn at being the main tutor first, okay? And we will allow you to start the tutorial. I suggest you start with the easy stuff, such as, for those of you who are in my group, introducing their name and what they think might happen, or some kind of, you might have in Vietnam there might be a little thing that you share that just helps break the ice. Do you know what I mean when I say break the ice? So when groups come together at first they're cold, and so we give them an activity, break the ice, so that they warm up and become more friendly or warm. So start with the easy stuff, and then you might decide as the first tutor to say, how are we going to work as a group? Get the students to say, are there any group rules you want to work by? So the first tutor has quite an easy job actually, okay? So it's always worth putting a hand up to be the first tutor, okay? The next step, so you might want to do some introductions. Okay, group, how are we going to work as a group? How do you like to work as a group? And then let's look at the first page. And the first page will be this picture. So just like we started in our PBL, it's tell me what you see. Okay, and they'll start saying what they see, and you can say, perhaps some of that is important information for our case. Let's write the key information on the board. It's likely at that stage that I will say, okay, time to change tutors. Okay? So what we do is I normally pull the tutor group out into the corridor, outside, away from the students, and say, how did you find that? And were there any issues that you were struggling with or wondering about? And then we say, okay, who's next? And then we say, for that person, what should that person, I will say to you, what should that person do when they go in the room? Okay? And the easy answer at first is, well, we've just started reading the case, so the next thing is the next step. Read the first page. So what are you going to do when you go in? You're going to ask a student to read the first page. So it's actually quite simple. You stick to process and it's quite simple. But as the PBL goes on, the tutoring and the students' knowledge become more complex, we'll start to see more stuff happening, and you will find yourself engrossed in the content, okay? And as a trainer, I have to say to you, yes, keep an eye on the content, but as a PBL tutor, let's keep an eye on the process, always thinking what the next process step is. And so we might find that students are identifying the key information and some are racing ahead. They want to make the diagnosis, and the tutor's role will be to bring it back and say, well, let's think about what might be happening here. What's happening here? What are your hypotheses? And then the next tutor, it might be around, so what explains that? You might point to the student who said a hypothesis and say, can you explain why you thought that was the case? So as we go, we'll change tutors over, we'll pull out the room, we'll talk about what's to happen next, and then the next person gets to go. Now, that makes it a bit of an interrupted process, okay? So the experience you had this morning as students, there was a flow, okay? There was a flow to the process. This will be interrupted. So there are some challenges to that interrupted process. We've thought long and hard how to change that, but we feel it's necessary to give everyone a go. Sometimes when the tutors are outside the room, learning how, talking about it and choosing who's next and who's going to have the next go, the students get on with the PBL case. So sometimes we go into the room and they've already moved on. So sometimes the tutor has to bring the action back to the key steps of the PBL process. So that's what's going to happen. Jill will take one group, I will take the other group. Jill and I are still a little bit worried that there's such big numbers that it might be quite disruptive having everyone pulling out of the room every time. So there may be some people who don't want to have a go at being a tutor and they might choose to sit in the back more as an observer. I think if you're going to be one of the PBL tutor trainers, you should absolutely be in that first group. It may be that we can only pull the first row group out. And I think that might be how we have to go, in which case it will be really interesting for those of you who sit quietly around the wall to keep watching the students and what they're doing. They may do some interesting things when the tutor is out of the room, okay? And that'll be something that we can talk about later. Does anyone have any questions about that process? I hope you're happy to just let it unfold and we will guide you. So in the meantime, Jill's briefing the students, you have your tutor notes, familiarise yourself with, just look at how it's set out and see that on each page there are guides for the tutor. So you have the abstract, which the tutor students don't have. You have the learning objectives. I often keep the learning objectives in front of me. That's what guides what I push on, that I question. And then you'll see that there are the screens the students get, and then there's some process hints underneath. You'll see on that first one, it's giving you some hints about what you might do as a tutor, okay? And then on the next one, further down, it's got tutor notes. You'll notice that there's this title there called, this is on page 5, prompting questions. The case writer always puts some prompting questions there because the case writer is anticipating the sorts of questions you might like to ask. You don't have to ask those questions because there may be no need, but they're there to help you think of good questions to ask. So if you're stuck, you can look at these prompting questions and go, that's a good one. We'll ask that one. Particularly if it's relevant, if it's needed, if you think it will help the students move on. Okay? So this is what all our tutors get, and as you go on you'll see there are process hints about what should be happening in the group there, and some tutor notes that gives you an idea, gives you information about the case, and also some prompting questions. So a lot of our tutors are what we call generalists. They're not necessarily specialists. They're not people off the street. They do know quite a lot. They're mostly health or upper medical graduates. And the content material in the tutor guides is to refresh and make sure that you know the content enough that you can ask good questions, or that you know what's the right stuff that the student should be coming out with. That's to help you. So just a few more minutes. maybe have a look through there, and in 10 minutes' time, come on up to the PBL rooms. So I'll meet you upstairs at 1:30, unless anyone's got a question. You're happy to just look at this? Yeah, because most of our tutors have this like a week beforehand, and when I first started I used to read up a lot, and then I realised it wasn't necessary, but so, okay. So 1:30 upstairs. Is that okay? Before the building.
So you guys we go out, we go back for the all room this morning?
Yes.
All room. 140, and it's 1 minute.